Welcome back to Explaining Everything, the channel where we dive into the stories and mysteries behind everyday things. Today's question comes from one of our curious viewers, Grandia Beluga. Thanks for the suggestion. Grandia, you asked, how does a boomerang come back when thrown? If you've ever tossed a boomerang expecting magic, but watched it crash land instead, you're not alone. These quirky curved sticks aren't just throwing toys, they're physics in action. So, what makes them spin through the air and come right back instead of flying off into oblivion? Stick around, pun totally intended, as we break down the aerodynamic secrets of the boomerang, right here on Explaining Everything. First things first, a boomerang is not just a regular stick you find on the ground. If you throw an ordinary stick expecting it to come back, congratulations, you now have a lost stick. A real boomerang has a specific curved shape and two wings, kind of like an airplane's but sassier. These wings have an airfoil design, meaning they're shaped like airplane wings, with one side being more curved than the other. This difference in shape is where the magic, aka science, happens. When you throw a boomerang correctly, you don't just chuck it forward, you give it spin. And not just any spin, but a rapid rotation that would make a figure skater jealous. This spinning motion is crucial because it creates something called gyroscopic stability. You know how a spinning top doesn't just flop over immediately? Same deal. The spinning keeps the boomerang stable and helps it stay in the air long enough to pull off its signature comeback. Here's where things get fancy. Because of the airfoil shape, as the boomerang moves through the air, the top wing moves faster than the bottom one. Why? Because the boomerang isn't just flying forward, it's also spinning. This causes the top wing to experience more lift than the bottom wing, creating an imbalance. And when there's an imbalance in lift, weird things happen, like unexpected turns. This imbalance doesn't just make the boomerang veer off in a random direction. Thanks to a fun little principle called gyroscopic precession. Fancy term, but stay with me. Instead of tilting sideways, the boomerang gradually curves its flight path in a circle. Essentially, physics is telling the boomerang, "Nah, you're not going straight. You're coming right back." Now, let's talk about technique. If you've ever tried throwing a boomerang and it just plopped to the ground like a disappointed pancake, you're not alone. There's an art to this. First, you don't throw a boomerang like a frisbee unless you enjoy the sight of it flying away, never to return. You hold it nearly vertical with a slight tilt and flick your wrist as you throw it forward. It's less of a brute force toss and more of a finesse move, like a fancy handshake with the air. Get it right, and the boomerang will soar, spin, and begin its return journey, making you look like a wizard. Get it wrong, and you'll have a new excuse to go boomerang shopping. Why doesn't every stick work like this? The reason a random tree branch doesn't act like a boomerang is because it doesn't have the airfoil shape, the weight distribution, or the carefully designed angles. Also, nature didn't build sticks for aerodynamic wizardry. It built them for squirrels to sit on. Boomerangs are engineered to take advantage of aerodynamics, making them one of the coolest accidental discoveries. Yes, They were originally designed as hunting weapons by indigenous Australians, but they figured out pretty quickly that having your hunting tool come back to you is pretty convenient. No more running 10 kilometers just to retrieve a missed shot. So, what happens if you throw a boomerang in space? Astronauts have actually tested this. Despite the lack of gravity, a boomerang still comes back because its flight path is dictated by air resistance and rotation, not gravity alone. In 2008, Japanese astronaut Takao Doi threw a boomerang inside the International Space Station, and sure enough, it worked just fine. Now, if only that same principle applied to all the socks lost in space, or, the dryer. Despite their fascinating physics, boomerangs are often misunderstood. One of the biggest myths? That all boomerangs are supposed to come back. In reality, traditional hunting boomerangs, often called throwing sticks, were designed to fly straight and hit their target, not return like some loyal pet. The returning boomerang we know today was more of a training tool or used for sport. Another misconception? That boomerangs always come back perfectly. Even the best throwers deal with rogue wind gusts, awkward angles, and the occasional rogue tree branch ruining their moment of glory. So, if your boomerang doesn't return, just remember, you're in good company. Boomerangs work because of their special shape, spinning motion, and the way air interacts with their wings. Thanks to lift, gyroscopic precession, and physics doing its thing, they carve out a circular flight path and return to the thrower, if thrown correctly. But let's be honest, the real reason we love boomerangs is because they make us feel like we have superpowers. And that's reason enough to keep throwing them, even if they don't always come back, which, let's face it, happens more often than we'd like to admit. And that's a wrap on boomerangs. If you had fun, or at least learned why your throws keep ending in disappointment, hit that like button, subscribe for more fun facts, and if you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for tuning in, and join us next time here in the channel that answers all the why, what, who, where, and how questions you've always wondered about, here on Explaining Everything.